Colin Field from Ping. Welcome to what's going to be a video and a podcast. So if you listen to this on the podcast, you get the pleasure of listening to Colin Field, who's one of the most experienced Ping experts that I know, that I have the pleasure of being able to deal with. And if you do want to watch the video, you can check it out at the YouTube channel. Watch it over there. You'll see Colin and I having a chat. Colin, welcome to the discussion. How are you? Good morning up there in Queensland. I'm in Melbourne. You're in Queensland. Are you well?
I've managed to put a vest on this morning, so it's just starting to get cool in Queensland. As much as we get up here.
Dear, I have that with one of my other podcast guests, regulars. He's always sitting there in a t-shirt, so we're always kicking out to him about that sort of stuff. Put a
collared shirt on for you this morning.
Thanks for getting dressed up. Of course, naturally, it's a Ping, one of the Ping apparel brand products here, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Not only do Ping, just as a side issue, not only do Ping do fabulous golf products, golf equipment, they do a wonderful range of apparel as well. Colin, as I said there before, you are one of the most experienced Ping guys, or definitely the most experienced Ping guys that we get the privilege of working alongside, working with, and getting access to you on occasion for your level of experience and depth with the brand. Just give us a little bit of an insight into your history with the Ping brand and some of those experiences in a working environment, what you've had during that journey, because it's extensive. You're just going to run through them and tell us, because we could talk about that just alone for an hour or so, but give us a bit of the backstory of Colin Field and why you are so experienced with Ping.
So originally I played Ping on tour for quite a few years. And I realized, like everyone, that you come to the realization that it's hard to make a living out there. Good fun while you can do it, but it's hard to make a living. I ended up going to Asia, working in the development of golf courses, so management, design, building golf courses, turning them in, changing around their operations and setting them up, and then moving on to a new project. And then part of that process, I went to a Ping fitting training day. And I was the guy who sat at the front, asked all the questions. And so basically, I became the first fitting account in Southeast Asia. And I continued to do that. And after a few years, they just rang me up one day and said, "Would you like to come and work for us?" I said, "What do you want me to do?" We want you to provide training and education, travel around to the different countries and build the fitting program, provide product knowledge, and just basically build the brand in Asia. So jumped on a plane, flew over to Phoenix, had a couple of interviews, and as we were mentioning earlier, a couple of days later, I'm going to lunch with John Solheim, which was a really weird experience.
So I can imagine at that time, being a weird experience, they say never meet your heroes. I'd love to meet all my heroes. You're sitting there having lunch with John Solheim. It must have been very surreal. What's John Solheim? John is the son of Carsten, yeah?
Yeah.
So Carsten Solheim obviously started Ping. What was that like?
Well, intimidating at first, right? So, but, he's such a nice guy. And Ping is a very different company. It's very family orientated. People walk around. There's a lot of different buildings on the campus, and people will ride bikes from one campus to the other. So it's a very informal environment, really. But yeah, sitting down with John, and we went to a little, Mexican Chinese restaurant called Chino Bandinos. And he said, "Oh, the last person, I've been here for ages. This is fantastic. It's a real local sort of place. But the last person I brought here was Phil Mickelson. And it was a long time ago. So you're sitting there and you think, wow, what am I doing here?" So for a young kid from Australia to be thrust into that environment. But beyond that, John used to travel out to Asia for 2 weeks a year probably. And I got to travel with him during that period and got to know him really, really well. So I built a lot of trust and lots of funny things and fantastic experiences. And he's a quiet guy, but when he speaks, even in a meeting environment, a corporate environment, everything he says is quite profound. So he'll sit there and listen through an entire meeting and make one sentence, everyone go, "Wow, that was pretty good." So he's that type of guy. But no, I've had some really, really cool experiences with John, and he's such a nice guy. I remember World Cup soccer was a Friday afternoon. We're at the VIP range at Ping, and with an English guy who was also out at the same time. John comes wandering past and he goes, "Oh, where are you guys watching the World Cup tomorrow?" And we had actually made plans to go to a pub with a whole bunch of guys. And John goes, "Oh, I'd love you to come to my place." So we cancelled the pub plans, and we ended up going to John Solheim's house, sitting in his lounge, watching the World Cup soccer. And again, that's just a surreal experience. And then you see his house, which was, still is relatively humble, I would think, for his stature. But then you go out into the backyard and the pool is the shape of an I2 iron. So the lanes are the grooves, right? And then the shape of it is actually the wedge. So if you go into Google Maps, you can actually log in and find that. But it's, so very cool experiences, amazing company, very personal, and very fortunate to have that relationship with John and the rest of the family.
So back in Asia, back at work, so worked on the education, building the brand, training and bringing, ping knowledge up around the region, but then got to work on tour over there, servicing the ping tour staff over there in the Asian tour and the other tours around that region, yeah?
Yeah, so being a regional person, you end up doing lots of different things. So, the first goal was to, start doing fitting training, getting people, used to the fitting environment, and look at tools, changing the specifications of things to be more Asian specific. So all those types of things. So working on Asian development products. So we end up working with Fujikura and working on Asian specific shafts. We got sent to Japan at one stage and said, what do we need to in Japan? You guys go work on some ideas, come back and present to the board. So we come back and presented to the board, and that was the start of the Rapture iron. So, which is a very, very successful iron. It was a titanium faced iron. So that basically we went over, found out what we wanted, went back and presented to them and said, hey, this is what we want. Now the engineers design, develop it. We don't have the skills to do that, but we'd say this is basically what we need to satisfy the demands for this market. And that ended up being a very, very successful iron. The redwood putter, in flight, which is Asia was a very indoor environment. So we needed something to enhance the indoor experience. And in flight was a fantastic tool that took a lot of data, a lot of numbers, and turn it into a graphical format. So it's much easier to understand a fitting environment. Later that led into tour, which is kind of fun. So we started one player in each country, logical thing to do, build up, start at that point, and then obviously service the tours when European tour comes over to Asia. And then we started on a Korean specific program and Japan and so forth. And we built that up over a period of time to a fairly decent sort of program, and had representation from each of the countries in Asia. Korea is obviously larger, and Japan's very, very successful today.
Now, roll forward to today, you're sitting up there in Queensland. So your role's changed again. How long have you been in Queensland now and working for Ping here in Australia?
Back about 10 years now.
10 years, yeah. And looking after, what markets do you look after for Ping as a fitting and educator and sales rep?
A little bit, in Australia is a smaller market, so you end up doing a diverse range of things. So I live on the Gold Coast, so I look after a few accounts from the Gold Coast down to sort of Coffs Harbour, and then do the national product manager, the fitting manager, and tour. So you sort of overlap into a lot of different things. So you can put on a different hat sort of each day of the week, depending on what's going on, and depending on the product cycle too. We'll step away when new product comes and start to train internally and externally. Traveling to Phoenix to get the information from the engineers, sit down with them, really understand the product, and then come back and transfer that information to the staff and then onto the accounts and to the end user.
I want to spend a good chunk of the time, obviously, while we're here, just to talk about some of the new products that have hit the market since September last year or thereabouts. But just finishing off on the tour in Australia, and we sort of touched on it beforehand. Yeah, and the program that you've got in Australia for identifying talent and helping some of Australia's young talent, come into the Ping brand. And I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, if you look at the Ping staff on the main tours, they are a full bag sort of player. And I think that's what you try and do with these players that you've identified and tried to grow a relationship with. But let us know who some of those young talent that you've had the opportunity to work alongside with in growing their profile with the Ping brand here in Australia.
Yeah, so when I came back, we went down to the Australian Amateur just to, do a survey basically, and we identified that wasn't that many of the younger people using our gear. So we came back and had a meeting and decided to build a program. So with the support of the US, we sat down and said, well, let's work on 12 elite amateurs in Australia, and let's provide them the same tour level support as a tour player would get. We looked at different age groups, making sure we had, a cross-section of men and women players, or young girls and young boys, and just basically gave the same level of support we would for an Asian tour player or a US tour player, and just making sure that we work with them until the equipment's sound. So we started with players like Harrison Endicott, who now plays in Corn Ferry, Brett Coletta was playing on Corn Ferry. He's had a few struggles, but I'm sure he's a fantastic player and he'll be back. Travis Smith, who just wanders around the world with his man bun. So he's cruising around. He's currently playing in Asia at the moment. I think he's in Phuket on the beach probably at this point in time. But he's like a cat, just continues to fall on his feet. So he's doing well up there. We've got Caris Davidson. So she's just got her LPGA card after a couple of years in Japan, which is great. So, and then some other young pros like Shea Wills-Coleman and so forth, who we've been working with for an extended period of time. And now we look to that next group. Cassie Porter's just turned pro. She's done extremely well with the in the events she has turned and played in so far. She's a fantastic young girl. She communicates really well, handles herself well, and she's very professional about what she does. So she's an old head on young shoulders. And then moving down through the amateurs, we've got a few good young amateurs like Justice Paseo, who just finished second in the AusAm and did well in the Bonneville event last week. We've got a young guy called Billy Dowling who did well in the Australian Amateur. He's a very young kid, but he's pretty special as well. So we're working with a few others as well. So a really solid program, different age groups, men and women. And we just work with them, provide them a high level of support. So our strategy is to build those relationships when they're younger. And then we build that relationship. And that's historically what Ping has done with Lee Westwood and Bubba Watson and those types of players. They've got very strong relationships that go back well before college years. And as a result, we have a very high retention rate with those players.
Now, in your experience and sitting alongside the John Solheims and all of the marketing people and the product development people, what's the internal chat around women's golf? Because I went to the Solheim Cup at Glen Eagles in 2019, and I haven't been to many big tournaments. I've been to the Open in 2016, which was great. The Solheim Cup, obviously the events here in Australia. The Solheim Cup blew me away. And obviously Ping have this very strong focus on developing the women's game and being involved in that. What is the strategy, or what is the discussion around it? Why is that? When did that become such a driven factor for them? And what was some of the backstory on that?
I think because it was the Ryder Cup and there was nothing for women, Carsten wanted to start an event. So Carsten Solheim, the founder of the company, I think that was where it started. So, and that's the Solheim Cup, right? It's the Solheim family. So that's the origins of that. And that's just turned into a monster, right? And it's a fantastic event. You look at it on TV, it's a fantastic, spectacular event. I know when we go to Asia and Korea, and they go, why can't we make it Asia versus Europe versus, but they're going to retain the way it is at the moment. So, but it's a fantastic event. They focus a lot of time and energy. You look at the LPGA, we're very strong on the LPGA. There's a very high equipment usage. So we provide a high level of support that some of the other brands may not provide. It's just that's the nature of the company. It's a very humble little company in Phoenix.
Do they have a college program for the women college golfers?
It's really well balanced. So if you look at, there's a guy called Scott Sullivan. He looks after the college program in the US. And and most of those players, if you go to the college programs and you go to Arizona State University or something like that, which is an amazing facility, we have a high use of equipment usage for Ping in those arenas.
Then we'll transition into talking about some of these great products that have come out, but just with every great product that comes out, it just doesn't happen. There's an ideation phase, there's a design phase, and testing and all of that. And I know from my experience in Mercedes-Benz in the car industry, how long that sort of life cycle is, and I can only imagine that it's extensive for golf. What you said you've been involved in some product development. What does that time frame look like? Like we've got I-59 now, we've got I-525 and all of that sort of thing. What sort of time frame does that look like for Ping?
I think you got to look at it from two different perspectives. One is technology. So if you look at some of the technologies that we have today, a lot of that research and development would have been done 6 or 7 years ago. And I'll give you an example of that would be the driver, right? So we have a rough surface on the driver, and there's a friction coefficient which changes or controls the rate of spin. So, and that changes relative to the angle there. So you can get that a certain amount of friction at a certain angle, it creates a certain amount of spin. You change the angle, it changes that. So with the driver, we have a particular friction on the face that reduces spin without lowering the center of gravity and reducing the forgiveness of the driver, which is part of the reason why the driver is so stable. Now, that research was done a long time ago by a guy called Dr. Henrik Henriksen, who's actually come out to Australia. So he also designed the turbulators. So pretty smart guys, and they develop and research technologies, right? And then that provides a tool for the engineers to incorporate into the design. Now, some of those things are not feasible at that point in time, and then they continue to work on it where it becomes feasible, where you can actually make a driver or iron at a particular price point. Then once the engineers get the brief and they've got new technologies to work with, they'll incorporate that into the design. But they'll be, 4 years ahead. And then the others are just working on technologies and ideas and so forth. So we have a very large analysis and testing department. So they do a lot of research, but it won't be on a specific club. It will be on a particular attribute that contributes to performance in a particular way. So that's quite interesting to see some of the research. There's a guy called Dr. Paul Wood and Dr. Eric Henriksen. They work in that field. And actually an Australian guy, Dr. John O'Shepard. So, so Dr. Jono, he's, you wouldn't pick him for a doctor. He's got the shirt out, he's got the collar over here. And, but yeah, smart guy, and they're all working in research. And, but there's a lot of time and energy in what's called the analysis and testing department, as opposed to just purely, hey, we need to design a new golf club. When the engineers are given a brief, they've also already got all these tools over here that they can incorporate into a design, and this research that supports improvements in the performance of the next generation of product.
Yeah, I can imagine it would be fascinating to get a little insight into that. And I think you can, I know you can tell that if you understand ping and you play ping and you follow that journey, because the history of the company is very, very extensive. You can see how they are very much that engineering driven by that precision. Driven by that precision.
Very much, it's an engineering company first.
Yeah.
I think it's frustrating sometimes for the people inside the company, because it is engineering driven. All the conversations are engineering driven, and there's not a lot of marketing going on. We do a great job of marketing. We've improved a lot, but the focus is on performance first, right? Yeah. And that's where all the time and energy, and all the meetings I've sat in with at a corporate level is very, very focused on the engineering. And John Solihan won't sign off on a new product unless he can see the testing that, it's 3% better there, it's 4% better there, and all that testing supports that new product is good enough and outperforms the previous version before they bring that to market.
I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 putters beside me. There's some history in those 5 putters there. We'll talk about that later. And that's not all of the putters that I've got in the Ping family. I've, pretty much replicated any of the Ping putters that I touched as a junior. And when I say touched, so my first coach had the Ping cushion. And I remember being, as a 13-year-old, fascinated, A, with his putting stroke, and B, with this putter. It would look different to what I had. So I remembered that. I went and made it my purpose to find one. My first ever Ping putter was an Answer. I bought it in 87 in Palm Springs. When I was over there playing golf. I had one of those for many years. Unfortunately, it got stolen, but I've replaced that. And all of the other putters that I was fascinated with, I putted with a clone. Even back in the 80s, they were cloning putters. One of the first putters that they cloned was the B60. So I've got a B60. We'll talk about some history in these putters, because I think it's largely, especially with so many new golfers coming to the market, and we're blessed to have so many people coming to the game at this time. I see that on a weekly, daily basis with people that don't have an understanding yet, or that developed level of appreciation for the history in the game, but they just want to play golf. So that's the main objective. But the Answer putter, and I talked about it in this little video I just recently did for the Drum and Golf YouTube channel on PLD. The Answer putter basically created the shape that we all know now, and so many people have replicated. We might talk a little bit about that then, but right now let's talk about some of the new iron product, some of the other the wedge product that's come out. What's the current product phase look like? Where do we start? I-59.
Yeah. Firstly, we're just happy to have product at the moment.
Right. Yeah.
So I think we're getting in a better position there, and we're actually seeing stuff come in, which is great. So at the moment, we've just launched PLD putters. So nice segue there into PLD putters. And that's something that I think I first heard about, maybe 8 to 10 years ago, where they started to mill putters. But the objective there was to listen to players, mill the putters, give them exactly what they want, find out what is most popular, and actually create a model or a series that eventually can become commercial. So we're still doing that. We've only really just launched that. And it's been really, really well received. So we're well oversubscribed for the quantity of stock that we have at the moment and worldwide. So, but yeah, they started building, anything they want. Players, they wanted a patina finish, which is a rusty finish, and they wanted this hosel or that neck or that line or a dot on there or a particular weight. They would make, actually, I've got some here, we'd make a putter. Yeah, so there's a patina version of a tine, so it's a face balance version. So there's some of the things we work with. So as a result, we've got different finishes and so forth. So that then they can take 1,000 different permutations and different grooves and find out which are the most popular, narrow that down to a more realistic range that we can then launch to the market, which is what we've just done with a PLD. So PLD is Putter Lab Designs, where we do all the research and development. So there's a guy called Tony Serrano who's been an engineer with Ping for a long time. He's headed up that program, and he's done a fantastic job with the tour guys first. Let's satisfy their needs and wants, and now we're launching that out with 4 models, and hopefully that series will expand out. But they're just beautifully milled putters, forged 303 block that it's then 3 or 4 axis milled, depending on the shape and the design of the putter. Different grooves. So we've got a deep AMP, which is aggressive milling pattern groove across there, which was the preferred. So when you players look at 5 or 6 different groove structures that have different sounds and feedback off the face, AMP, or the deep AMP, was the preferred across the board. So in the middle of the bell curve, you get other people like a flat face or a slower impact off the face, but a deep AMP. So we incorporate all those factors into the PLD design, and here we are. We've launched it, and it's off and running. So it's pretty exciting.
4 hours of machine milling, pretty much thereabouts, to produce one item. Is that true?
Yeah. Depending on the design. So they're all, there's different machines with 3 or 4 axis and so forth. So different designs. And then, so they take a long time to make those putters. So, so they are at the premium end of the market, but we've got other great putters as well. But, putters is an interesting one. So I think people over time are getting used to, they spend a lot on a driver and they want a cheap putter, but I think over time you'll see people are looking to, get a really good quality putter fitting, right? Get a putter that really suits them, and they're happy to spend, money on a nice premium putter that looks nice and there's a nice head cover and all the cool stuff that comes along with it. So.
Well, of course, Ping fitting is an absolutely essential part of, the whole Ping story. And, you do a great job with the putters where you call out on the shafts, who they suit or what stroke type they suit. And it really does give you, always, certainly at any of the drummer stores, you can get help identifying length, identifying lie angle, identifying stroke type, and fitting for that, loft as well. So we can go through that. We do that on a daily basis, but Ping do a great job of helping us identify on the little stick on the shaft there what sort of stroke arc type this putter is ideally suited for.
Yeah, so with putter fitting, you take the best players in the world. They don't all have perfect technique. You'll get players that aim left and block it in. Tiger aims right and pulls it in. So everyone has different things, but the best putters in the world do things consistently. So that's the key. So whatever they do, the same over and over again. And the standard deviation or the variation in their arc, the speed, the tempo, the angle attack, all that sort of stuff is very, very consistent. So they've got a very predictable result. So what the putter fitting is with the stroke type, if you've got a putter that matches your stroke type, you're a straight back, straight through type of person, generally you'll putt better with a face balance putter. So that means you get less variation in that particular stroke. Somebody who tends to like to arc their stroke a little bit, those people will be more consistency with a more of a toe down style putter. So if we can get a putter that sort of suits the player and matches their stroke, you get less variation in the actual physical result. So if you get smaller standard deviation in the speed, the tempo, the rotation of the club face, you're generally going to get a more consistent, more predictable result.
We touched on new golfers coming to the world of golf. For most golfers that haven't had a whole load of experience on the course, is there a go-to if they were listening to this and they didn't get a putter fitting, but they just want to go in and buy a putter? Is there just like a go-to type of putter that they should sort of gravitate towards?
I think, you can get different levels of fitting. So if we can just get a good length, where they've got relatively good alignment. So we don't want, what's called parallax error, where, if you're trying to shoot a gun and we're over here and my head's over there, we can't see very well. So we generally want to be over the golf ball. We want the putter to sit generally flat to the ground. We want to have, if someone's got a relatively straight back, straight through stroke, maybe something that's more face balanced, something a little bit more archy. We may want something that's more like a traditional answer putter. So I think you can get into the general realm and get that fairly solid. It's a bit like our color code chart. Our color code chart for irons provides a high statistical probability. So if someone's new to the game, but we know how fast they swing it, and we know that they're 6'2" and their wrist to floor is 35, we can get a club that's statistically very, very close for that person. And they're going to develop better technique around a club that's statistically correct for them than just getting a standard golf club and trying to adapt or develop poor technique around a club that doesn't suit them. So putter's the same. You can get, just by taking those simple attributes, get a good length, lie, and model type. And you can get something that you're probably going to develop better technique with over a longer period of time. And that translates to irons and other clubs as well.
Well, the Ping PLD putters are fantastic. I spent a couple of days down at Barnbougle with the Primetime and the Answer 2. Beautiful, beautiful putting implements. Highly recommend having a look at those. What are some of the other putters in the family at the moment?
Ping 2021, so that provides a different feel or feedback off the face. So when you survey thousands of people, everyone gives you different feedback on what sort of feel, sound, and so forth people are looking for. Generally, the lower the marker, they like the more tactile feedback. So they want something that's more like the face like the PLD. As you move into higher handicaps, they're looking for generally a little bit more forgiveness in the feel. All right, so then they want more of an insert putter. And that's not everyone, but if you look over the percentages, you see a higher percentage of people with higher handicaps want that softer, more forgiving feel. So the Ping 2021 does a great job with that. And in that model, you've got lots of different stroke types and so forth. So you've got something there for each and every person, everything from some very high MOI alignment style putters to, something smaller, more traditional, if you like.
All right, so let's talk about this exciting new iron product. I'll take your lead. You talk about whichever one that you want to talk about first.
Well, the newest one's obviously the i525. So far we've only been out there fitting probably a couple of months. Really great club to fit. So I'm really excited about what that does. The 210 for us was a very popular product. So if you look at tour usage and you look at, the lower handicaps and so forth, the shape, the sole width, all those things from the 210 was very, very popular. At the same time, we introduced an iron called the i500, and that was a faster face iron for us. And really the i525 is taking that faster face technology, looking at how we can improve that, incorporate it into our i210, head size, width, length from heel to toe, and so forth. So when you pop it down, it pretty much looks like a 210. It's got that little bit wider sole, more forgiving through the turf. And then the face. So with the face, you've got a forged miraging steel face, and that creates it's a stronger material. Therefore, you can make it thinner and create deflection in the face to generate faster ball speed. And now the challenge with that is to get a more pleasing sound for the average golfer. So people want to look at that head size. They want the faster face. They want the distance. They want the consistency and pick up that extra 5 to 7 yards. But there's two challenges. One is the sound when you've got a hollow construction iron. So they've got to work on that. And two is creating a very consistent result. So I think the golf industry has been through a process where it's been launch monitor driven. It's how far do I hit my 7 iron? I think what we need to do is backtrack a little bit now and say, it's not how far my 7 iron goes, it's how well does my 7 iron perform. And that includes, how consistent is the ball speed, how consistent is the spin rate, how consistent are we achieving good peak heights, good landing angles, and stopping power. So in some respects, we may actually need to go into a fitting today and actually come out with a more consistent result, but it's 4 yards shorter than their older iron. All right, that's realistically what we need to do as an industry to get better performance. And the 525 really does that. So 210, the hollow construction, we've got the fast miraging steel face. The next challenge for the engineers was to refine the sound and feel. So you can have an iron that performs fantastic, but doesn't provide that feedback off the face. So the engineers have put an EVA or a polymer on the back of the face, and that's to help attenuate or reduce or control the sound. They've got some fantastic tools where they actually can measure frequency, right, the sound inside a golf club, and then they can look at different ways to changing that frequency and then identify positive frequencies and negative frequencies, meaning that things people like and what people don't like. So in the i525, if you look at the frequency, it's initially very similar to a 500, but it dissipates very quickly. And that provides a very different impact experience. So they're actually got engineers sitting there listening like you are now with headphones, right? Listening and looking at the frequencies and actually targeting specific frequencies to provide a more pleasurable impact experience. So the i525 is a result of what we were speaking about earlier, where a lot of research into sound, all right, has then come back and incorporated into this iron. So we've got better pleasing sound. We're maintaining good peak height, so the center of gravity is a little bit further back. So we're getting that nice height, peak height, slightly lower spin, more deflection in the face, more ball speed, and fine-tuning the sound. So so far, it's been an absolute pleasure to fit.
I played it over 71 holes at, once again, Barnbougle the other week, and it really, really impressed me. The sound. I'll do a little bit of a plug here for the Drum and Golf YouTube channel. You can see my short introduction video, and it very much is an introduction to the product highlights. But I wove in there a couple of shots that I played, which is we're trying to build these videos and build the profile over there at Drum and Golf YouTube. You can hear a couple of well struck irons there, and the sound is phenomenal through the camera. It really is well compressed, but it's just a beautiful sound. And that's basically what you articulate is how I experienced it. I've played i210 in the past. I love that shape. I love the forgiveness in the longer irons, but then it gets right down into that real shot making shape in the scoring clubs. I love that concept. Because at my level where I play, sort of like 3, 4, 5, 6 handicap, somewhere in between there. You still need that forgiveness, and I think a lot of elite players still need. I see that as a trend. People looking for support and forgiveness at that top end of the bag, but they still need that scoring opportunity club down there, and the i525 does it wonderfully. The one of the things that I was struck by was that spin control. Let's talk about Micromax grooves, because I think that gets maybe pushed aside, but people need to know that the spin control with Micromax grooves and a hollow construction iron, which generically speaking can sometimes be a little bit prone to getting those inconsistent flies and that sort of thing. What does Micromax groove do to eliminate that?
Well, it's a combination of all those things, like the face. You can make a face that's fast and really hit at miles. You can put the center of gravity in a particular location, make it go miles. But we're trying to get the ball speed, we're trying to get good peak height, and we're trying to get that good stopping power and consistent results. So that's what performance is at the end of the day. It's not how far you hit a 7-iron, right? It's proximity to the flag, right? So that's really what you need to focus on. So the Micromax grooves have been great. So basically the result of all the testing is that we get greater spin retention in the longer irons. All right, so we get a more controlled spin, right? We don't get the degradation spin as you move to the longer irons, and we're getting more control in the shorter irons, more consistent spin. So, and it's the same as Hydropower that we have in the wedges and bits and pieces. They're working on how do we minimize the standard deviations? How do we get that really consistent? What does a well-struck 4-iron do, and what does a poorly struck 4-iron do? How can we get that poorly struck 4-iron to perform more like the well-struck 4-iron? And get that tight dispersion. So, and tight dispersion's been ball speed, the spin rate, the launch angle, the carry distance, the stopping power, the peak height, and the deviation sideways. So all those things contribute to performance, and that's what they're working on. So the Hydropower we have in the wedges and some of the other clubs, and we've got the grooves, all those things they're those research projects that the engineers have been working on to create more consistent results. And then more consistency, long-term in a fitting environment, we get that smaller circle on the launch monitor, all right, with the appropriate stopping power. And that's what's going to give people better performance long-term. Yeah,
that degradation spin that you mentioned there, like people might have experienced if they're playing other clubs, but you hit one and spins degraded. We had a wonderful presentation a couple of years ago at the MCG by a couple of the high-level ping engineers that came out, and they gave us this really detailed insight into how you measure a lot of your product development, and they talked about spin and the degradation of spin and what causes that, and particles in between the ball and the face is one of the biggest impacts of that. But the long iron, that ball dropping out of the air, I don't think people they might experience it, but they don't really realize what it's doing. And that one that doesn't come out with the spin, it looks like it's a great flighted shot, and all of a sudden it just drops out of the air because it doesn't have the aerodynamic stability through the air. So that's what you're talking about there. Is that correct? That spin being consistent. So that 4-iron is going to be penetrating as well as it can within that range of tighter window?
Yeah, so if we have a 4-iron that spins at 4,000 and one spins at 2,000, that 2,000 spin's going to come out like a little flat bullet.
Yeah.
One, it's not going to carry as far in the air unless you've got a huge amount of club head speed and ball speed. Secondly, when it does land on a green, if it gets to the green, it's just going to go rocketing straight through the back.
Yeah.
So we need to get that, and that sort of correlates into optimizing somebody's set too. So we want to do that through the performance of the golf clubs, but also we need to, through a fitting environment, we want to make sure that we optimize the set. So the grooves help that, Hydropower helps that. And if we get into the wedges, I'll explain what Hydropower does. But also fitting for the right element. Are we dropping out, moving the hybrids down one, dropping out 9, incorporating one more lofted wood? That's another great topic of discussion that, it's something that we do every day when we're fitting, is just optimizing somebody's set. But I think the set configurations will look very different in a few years.
Oh, definitely. We're seeing that now, like the proliferation of 7-woods, for example. It doesn't take too many tour pros to whack a 7-wood in their bag and, realize how that aids to their shot making, to see a stream of people coming in going, oh, have you got a 7-wood? And, of course, in my world, sometimes we get a little bit caught behind the trend of what happens on tour, and they see, a ping player using a 7-wood, and people come in wanting a 7-wood, and we don't have one, so we've got to play a bit of catch up. That's just the world, and we get there eventually. But I've seen a lot of people wanting 7-woods. Have you guys seen that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've been fitting that, and we see that in testing. So a 7-wood, you've got a longer lever, right? You've got a faster face. The center of gravity is further back in the face. That creates more shaft deflection, which creates a higher launch angle. So as a result, the 7-wood's going to create the highest ball flight. All right, the hybrid's going to be probably generally slightly lower than that, and the iron will be slightly lower than that again. So as we see somebody hitting shots, quite often we see the wedge 9, 8, 7. We see equal increments in distance between each of those clubs. At some point in time, we see degradation where that gapping starts to taper off, and we'll see 10 meters, 10 meters, 10 meters, 9 meters, 8 meters, 4 meters. At that point, if that club's well fitted, we need to find another club that regulates that gapping between each club. And then for a lot of people, it's 7-woods. And then Tour has been fantastic because we probably build a 7-wood for 90% of our players. Now, they may or may not use it every week. It depends on the conditions. The US style golf course, and it's really firm US Open style golf course, sorry. They may incorporate that golf course, or if there's a lot of long shots in, they'll bring that out. And you see non-ping players. I think Cameron Smith hit 7-wood into 15 at the Masters in the last round. He hit it back right there. So, Dustin Johnson's been playing 7-wood. So it's an important club, and I think it's just given it credibility, right? And I think now that something that, for every golfer out there, if you haven't analyzed your set and then went through a gapping analysis, that's something that you could do and maybe change 1 or 2 clubs in your bag and really optimize your performance, as opposed to maybe trying everything or testing or changing everything. Maybe there's 1 or 2 changes that can tweak your set and get some fantastic results, and make sure you've got 14 functional clubs in your bag.
What club do you see the tour staff dropping out in preference to a 7-wood?
It would be generally a longer iron, depending on, they'll change it. You might see them keep a 2-iron and drop a 3-iron out and then bring a 7-wood in. Right, or a driving iron style club, if it's a tight course or long rough. So wedges don't, they might play around with bouncers and bits and pieces, depending on the turf conditions and the environment. But it's generally that long end. They might have 3 or 4 options that, they only need 2 and they chop and change around. And that 7-wood build on tour, generally it's 9-wood length. It's slightly shorter for control, and it's set to an open position. So in our hosel configuration, it's the big minus, right, which sort of flattens the lying or opens it a little bit. So it's important not to just test 7-woods, but get the right configurational setup for the stronger player who has a higher closure rate of the club. That flat open position generally neutralizes the ball flight, whereas in a more neutral setting, they may find it a little bit too easy to turn over. And the other thing from a fitting environment is having, stable enough shaft for the real speed for the stronger player, to ensure that, we're not turning it over and we're getting that neutral ball flight. But yeah, it's a phenomenal golf club. But if there's one thing I can, encourage your listeners to do is, look at your bag and work out what clubs are redundant and what can you do to optimize your set to get a more functional set.
Just to tell the story about my bag, because a lot of people ask me about, what do you play? And my bags are, depending on the week, it's a mixed bag of a whole load of different stuff. But a lot of people are surprised to know I don't carry a 3-wood. And then they're surprised to know that I carry a 5-wood, which is a G410, and a 2 driving iron. And they go, well, why have you got those two? And I said, well, it's about ball flight. And exactly as this, Peninsula Kingswood, firm greens, par 5s, I can't take a 2-iron in there and stop it. I need the carry and the height. I'm not looking for, maximum distance in that set of the end of the bag. I'm looking for control. But then, sandbelt short par 4s and things like that. I want a controllable T-ball club. That 2 driving iron just puts it out there nice and low under the wind, goes the requisite distance. And I've got 2 different flight shapes to give me 2 different results in ostensibly the same sort of distance club. And once you explain it like that, people go, oh, yeah, okay. And it sort of leans into what we're talking about. Just while we talked about woods, in all of the ping drivers that and fairway woods product that I've had, and it's been many, I gravitate towards the ping tour shaft. Now, it's quite a special and unique item from Ping. What makes the Ping tour shaft so special?
It's been around for quite some time. It's had a couple of tweaks,
mm-hmm.
But it's just a good solid shaft. So it's really, if you look at where the Tour 65 sits at, which is it's a stronger tip, slightly heavier option. So for that, better players sort of maybe swing 100 miles an hour. So a lot of solid, low markers will swing around that sort of clubhead speed. It fits fantastic. So it's just a nice, stable shaft. We have our own design engineers. So our lead shaft engineer is an design engineer for our dealer. So we develop our own shafts. We use aftermarket shafts as well, but we spend a lot of time and energy on our own shafts as well, in both wedge shafts, iron shafts with our AWT shaft, as well as wood shafts. So we focus, a lot of time and energy just to provide, shafts that really optimize and work well with our heads. Right, and the tour shaft is a great option that provides that lower launch, lower spin, or less active tip, if you like. So just a great shaft. It's had a couple of little tweaks over the last few years, but it's pretty much the same shaft it has been for a couple of years.
So, correct me if I'm wrong. That shaft, therefore, is made by someone else, but made to your exacting specifications.
Yes. So we do that. I know, see some stuff online that they talk that is this shaft. It's not. It's designed by our engineers. It's made by a company to our specifications, and the same as our AWT shaft. It's made by Nippon. So we design the shaft. It's a sending weight shaft with the 3 irons lighter and the wedges heavier. All right, which makes you think of a driver at 65 grams, a fairway wood at 75 grams, hybrid at 85 grams. All right, it doesn't make sense for the 3 iron to be the longest, heaviest shaft in your bag and then get to a lighter shaft. So what an ascending weight shaft does, we follow that progression. So we get a hybrid at 85, and then the 3 irons, the lightest, and the wedges, the heaviest. So that creates more speed in the longer irons, more ability to flight the golf ball, and it provides more stability and lower ball flight in the shorter irons.
Beautiful. Okay, let's talk about the other new iron product. It's another ripper, the i59.
Yeah, it's got a lot of tech in there. So it sits at a pretty solid price point. But I think this is one of those clubs where we bring some new technology in. It starts off with a real players golf club, and then eventually we can see that technology permeate, like F1. It permeates down into other models in the future. But basically, it's a hollow construction. But then there's an aluminium frame on the inside. I wish I had a little piece here. I don't. There's an aluminium frame structure on the inside. And what that does is, instead of getting a face where it has a lot of deflection, which is not so good for a tour player, the last thing they want is a 7-iron suddenly going 8 meters further and create an unpredictable distance. But they would like more forgiveness. So what the hollow construction does with the aluminium frame on the inside, it creates discretionary weight for the engineers so they can reposition that weight and increase the MOI or make the golf club more forgiving, but we're stabilizing the face, not creating deflection in the face. As a result, we're getting stable results and we're getting less twisting and impact. We get that spin retention of long irons, all that good stuff that we want to optimize and create consistent performance.
A Lumicore, you've got there's a lot of technology and it's got a lot of names, and it's not Jingo. What is a Lumicore?
It's an aluminium core of the club, basically, right? And then you look at it. It's they use what's called finite element analysis, which is computer analysis to looking at the structure, so they can create something that's just as strong but have a lot of holes in areas, right? So it's basically like the framework to a building. So when we get that, we can get something that's very strong. So we get no movement in the face or very stable results off the face. But any discretionary weight that we can reposition without losing the structural integrity of the iron, we can then take that weight and reposition elsewhere. And that's pretty much what that does.
Mm-hmm. I remember the first time hitting that was back in September. Really blew me away with everything you described and how it felt off the face. It was unbelievable. Okay, the next new product, Glide 4.0 wedges.
Yeah, so really good traction on tour. The uptake's been really, really good for our guys, which is great. They've gone into bags very quickly. Wedges are a very particular thing. You'll get people, not trying to change during the course of a year and so forth. They'll wait, but they've gone into bags fairly quickly. So I think the first advantage, and it's something that's been around for a long time, is the Hydropower, right? So Hydropower is not new to the Glide 4.0. But what it does, it basically sheds water away from the face, enables the face to contact the ball, very similar to a dry condition. Very rarely do we actually hit in a perfectly dry condition. We're hitting off grass, we're hitting off water, there's moisture in that grass. And when that moisture gets between the golf ball and the club face, right, we get different results, the spin changes, the flight changes, all those things. So if we can create a more consistent result off the face, we get more consistent ball speed, we get more consistent launch angle, more consistent spin rate, therefore the distance is more consistent, right? We know how the ball's going to react when it hits the green. Then you can sort of judge how hard you're going to hit it. So imagine waxing a car. When you pour that water on that car, the water beads, it sort of sits up in little bubbles, and then it's able to get away really, really quickly. So that's what Hydropower does. It enables the water to shed away, enables to get a more consistent result. So in testing, and you'll see a lot of the online testing companies that sort of promote their websites and so forth, we see that we may get 9,500 spin for a particular loft at a particular speed, but when we put water on the face and so forth, the spin rate doesn't drop down as much. So it may only come down 500 or 1,000 RPM. Whereas you'll see without Hydropower, you'll see we may start at the same spin rate or even higher spin rate, but when you get moisture in the face or on the face between the golf ball and the club face, you'll see major drop-offs in spin, right? So that's the advantage of what Hydropower does, and we're trying to incorporate that wherever we can into all our irons. So it's a fantastic tool and probably a competitive advantage for us as a brand. The next thing was the players were looking for a smaller, more compact head, right? So it tied into the 59s and the blueprints and so forth. So we've got the Glide Forge Pro, which is a really small, compact head. A real, elite player's head is looking for something really small, but we wanted a slightly smaller head. But this year, instead of making everything smaller, the I2 sole and the WS sole, which is more geared towards the higher handicappers, it still retains the larger, more forgiving head size, but the S and the T grind are actually a smaller, more compact head. And that creates probably a more appealing look at a dress and ties into those smaller head profiles like the I525 and so forth. So first couple of things, feels important in the wedge. Yep. So the elastomer is a material that's in the back of the face. It's got larger surface area that's in contact with the back of the face. As a result, it provides enhanced impact experience. That also saves some weight, enables engineers to redistribute it and maintain inertia. So even though it's a smaller head, we're able to retain inertia or forgiveness, if you like. Combine that with the grooves and everything else that's going on, you've just got a nice, small, compact golf club that's very, very consistent and does really, really well in testing.
Once again, tried that down at Barnbougle. Really, really, really great. I'm happy with that. And also had the tall wedge down there as well, which I'd never really used or seen before, funnily enough. And it was great. It was off that tight lie, off the tight fescue, with the sole grind in the tall model. It was the tall forged. It was fantastic. Really just picked the ball off there very, very cleanly. We haven't talked about, we talked about 7 woods, but what about driver? It's probably the hero flagship of, setting the course for a lot of the Ping products. You mentioned before how stable it is. It just seems to be the fact that, a G425 hits the ball ridiculously straight. And that's not me saying that. That's a number of independent people that have used it and tested it and played with it and taken it out for one hit or 2 years, or two hits, with 20 hits. They all come back and say how ridiculously straight it is. So how do Ping really work towards doing that?
So being an engineering company, they're always focused on inertia. And I go to, attend a lot of meetings where it's sort of moment of inertia. And it sounds a bit boring, but it works at the end of the day. So, yeah. And, Carson, at the end of the day, was an aerospace engineer. And he knew when he started building golf clubs that if he could reduce the amount of twisting in a golf club, it's more stable, right? Therefore, it doesn't twist as much. It's more accurate. We don't reduce ball speed as the club twists. We retain spin and all that good stuff. So if you think of an aeroplane, we've got fuel load in an aeroplane. So all that fuel is distributed to there. It's very stable. As that fuel load comes in, it becomes more unstable. And that's pretty much how Carson started the company. He was 43 years of age, went to play golf, picked up a golf club, come home and thought, these things don't make sense from an engineering principle. I can do better than that. And that's how he started. So he went back with his first putter. He got 2 paddle pop sticks and 3 sugar cubes sitting on the table. And he knew if he could move the weight to the right and to the left and have somewhere to put a shaft in, right, which is the 1A putter, that would be a more stable result. So, and that's the foundation of the company, if you like. So we're always working on, inertia and getting the very high values. And that incorporates into all our golf clubs. We're trying to get, appropriate head size, but get as much, inertia or forgiveness built into the golf club as we can. And that's been a founding principle. So the G42 drive is extremely stable, especially with the Max. So very high heel toe inertia. You'll hear about MOI. They measure it in 2 ways. One is on a vertical axis, which is heel toe, and one is on a horizontal axis, which is top bottom. So that's the rotation this way, and that is the rotation that way. So we want consistent spin. So when you hit the ball vertically, up and down in the face, we don't want to have that massive lower launch and that massive high spin. When you hit the ball high in the face, we don't want to have a massively high launch and lower spin. We want to keep that standard deviation launch and spin more consistent. So that's on a vertical plane. On a horizontal plane, we want to make sure that as you hit it on the heel and toe, it's not twisting. So that higher inertia, saving weight wherever we can, using that finite element analysis, saving weight, redistributing to the perimeter of the golf club, moving it back as far as we can. And as we mentioned earlier, so we can make a sub-zero driver and bring it down and forward, the center of gravity, that makes the golf club lower spin, but it also reduces some of the stability in the face. So we want to pull the weight back as far as we can. So even though we've pulled that weight back, we then reduce some of that spin through the friction on the face. So they're always working on those types of things. Also, if you look at the back weight, it's the probably the heaviest back weight you see in the golf industry. And the Max, it'll be sort of 23 to 27 grams, depending on the head and shaft combination. But it's that moving that weight to the extreme perimeter of the golf club just makes the golf club extremely stable. So if you take a kite, you fly it around, it's got a very short tail, it moves around quite easily. You put that long tail on the end of that kite, it's extremely stable. So it's pretty much a simple engineering principle, all right, but it works at the end of the day and just creates very consistent, stable results. And if we can get 2 more fairways around, and instead of losing 15 yards on a mishit, we only lose 5, that's advantageous for the player at the end of the day. It's going to lower their scores, they're going to hit more fairways, and they're going to enjoy their golf more.
Exactly correct, mate. Once again, at Barnbougle, it's been a while since I'd used a driver, but at Barnbougle, it just pop these little bullets down the fairway every time. Anyway, it's I'm sounding like a Ping advert on my end. I've got to be neutral, but I took as part of the I-525 testing for the videos. The guys set me up with the full bag of everything, and it had been a while since I'd used the Ping driver. I think in my bag in my time I had G410, G400, G30, G25, and G20. So, I've personally owned all of those drivers. So it was my first time, of course, with the 425, and it was just middle of the fairway, stone cold in the morning, middle of the fairway. It was fantastic. Used the I-525, so great. I shot 4 over around Barnbougle Dunes. I was taking photos, flying a drone and trying to play golf. First up, 7:28 in the morning.
Beautiful.
It was good for me. That's pretty good for me. 4 over, and pretty much we had 71 holes over 2 days. Once I shot my 4 over in the morning, I'd stamp my authority amongst my playing partners in the group. And I said, that's it, I'm done. I'll just be having fun for the rest of the trip here now. And took some nice photos. But it was great. I had a lot of fun with the product. Colin, I've taken up a whole host of your time. I talked about showing you some of my history. This Ping Zing here with the magnesium head. I've got a Ping Zing. Is it the Zing 2 with the what's the silver metal way? The
74 stainless.
Yeah, 74 stainless. So I've got one of those in there, which my mum putted with. So that's the Zing that I've got. What else have I got here? Oh, there it is. There, that's it. There, I did bring it out. That's that. So I talked about collecting putters that meant something to me. So my late mum putted with this putter through her golfing journey. So I've got one of those. What else have I got here? This is a special one. I can't remember where I found that. That's what's that one? That's the Ping Pal. That was one of the early heel toe designs. Did the Pal come before the Answer or after the Answer?
Answer was primarily first, and then you look at the Pal. It's a permutation of there. There's a great room at Ping, and it's the archive room. If you ever get a chance to go there, make sure you throw that on the list. But that archive room has basically one of everything, and there's stuff in there I've never seen before. For the doors open, I always try and pop in there and see some stuff. But it's amazing. There's just one of everything, and just wander around. It's just basically like a history lesson of the golf industry.
I had a 12-year career with wonderful car brand Mercedes-Benz, and I was privileged enough to see basically all the ins and outs of everything that makes a Mercedes-Benz a Mercedes-Benz. And on one particular trip, not only did we go to the museum, but they have a classic centre. And basically we walked out the back laneway to the classic centre, and then there's these big nondescript barns at the back, just German barn type things with doors, just like barn doors. The guy unlocks them and says, okay, we'll go through a look through here. And it's a little bit like that, history. It's just, there's unbelievable amount of cars in there that don't even make it into the museum. And it sort of sounds like your experience in the archive room. And it's amazing. And I quite often, suggest that Ping to me seems a little bit like that Mercedes-Benz, very engineering oriented company, nothing good unless it's great. The product is primary and its performance is the focus of development, and the marketing piece of it second. So I'd love to, it's one of my missions and goals to go and see that room and see the gold putter room and the vault and just see everything that is on the campus as you referred to it. Here's another one that's pretty special to me. That's the, what's that one? That's the O-Blade.
There's a lot. You go through there, it's long necks, short necks, and all sorts of things. But there's a lot. Every time I go in there, I see something else I've never seen before.
Palm Springs, 1987. I picked up my first Answer. I thought I was in heaven when I picked that up, and I played with that for the rest of the tour in 87 in Palm Springs. And I've got 3 of these now, and they're really, really special to me.
Hasn't changed very much, has it?
Hasn't changed. Well, it's that's what I was saying. Look at that. That's the Answer. People, if you're only new to golf and you've got this far and you're looking at and you see all these putters that you've picked up, and they look like that, that's where it started. That one right there. There's a couple of special ones of these. They've become quite collectible, haven't they?
Yeah, there's a website called Pongman. So he's a sort of somebody who's just really interested, and it's actually he records all the putters and bits and pieces and what their value is. And there's certain things. There's one where custom design is basically a solid block, and I think there's 4 holes in it, and then there's a heavier weight that goes inside it. There's a wire that comes off the back. And what Carson would do would he put a marker in the back, and then you put the 2 coins, 2 heavier weights on the inside, and get people to putt over paper. And as you hit putts across the face, that would squiggle and draw a line on the back. So then he'd take the weights and he'd place them on the outside, right? Perimeter weighting and hot raising inertia, and then do the same thing. And so those particular putters, I think there's 5 or 6 in existence. I think Ping has 2. They know of 2 more. There's a couple out there, but they're worth a fortune if you can find one of those. But Pongman's a pretty cool little site, and he sort of keeps track of what's valuable and what's special and what's very unique and so forth. So quite an interesting website. I'll
check that out for sure. Colin, you've got a race off to do. Get on with your day of working for Ping and representing them fantastically as you do. As we could probably tell, we could talk about a load of stuff to do with the brand for a long time. We've been talking for an hour now. I'm let you go. I appreciate your time. I thank you for your time, and hopefully this can get into the ears of some people out there that might, if they wanted to learn a little bit more about Ping and they want to get a condensed version, maybe this has helped them, and I hope so. If you do have any questions, please feel free to let me know. And if you have a question for Colin, I can facilitate, trying to get an answer from Colin for you about Ping. But no problems at all. Cole, it's been great. Thank you.
Appreciate your time. It's a pleasure talking with you.
Okay. Thank you very much. This will be on YouTube. It'll be on the podcast, so you can listen to that anywhere you get that. But thanks, Colin, and I'll see you next time.
Thank you.